好，接下来我们讲那个
Let us continue with our class on A Journey to the
西
West.
游回忆录。今天那个
Today
题
we're
目
going
是
to
修行
cover
的
the
基础。
topic on the foundation of Dharma
然后
practice.
法王如意宝在那个93年的6月19日上午呢，
In the morning of June the 19th,
16
His Holiness
号
gave
17号到
empowerment
18号
of
19
his
号
own Dharma, the cycle of
那么17号呢
Peaceful
就是上午
Manjushri.
就是法王如意宝将自己的这个复藏法就是一复藏，就是文殊在那个
That is
文
his
武台山
own
就是
mind
所持的
Dharma,
这
the
个复
one
藏
that
法
he
文殊
reviewed
进修大圆满
in
的观
Mount
点
Wutai.
就是这今天我们这里就是也在这个观点是吧？就是
Today,
也是很好。
you're also
明天
receiving empowerment,
也
so
好，
that's
就是
really
凡
wonderful.
是这个元气就比较好
I
就是
think,
这个
well, let
法
it
王
be
也在
today
这
and
里
tomorrow
就是
you'll be
讲那个
receiving
开始这
empowerment,
个文
and
殊
I think this
进
kinds
修的
of
这个观点
auspicious
然后给大
coincidences
家
really wonderful.
只传授给
On
寺院
that
的
day,
这个心中和外来的
Ponso
这个出
Rinpoche
发在观
was
点之前
giving
呢，就是
the
法王是这样
audience
说的。
this empowerment
对，法
to
王
the
是这样
to the
说
audience gathered in the
这一
temple,
段呢，就是
including
观
people
点前面
affiliated
说
with the
然后
temple
下
and
一
those
段的
from
话呢
other
就是
places. Before
在
the
那个传那
empowerment,
个文殊大圆满的
His
时候说，
Holiness
就是属于我们
addressed
字体
them
应该
with
是
the
不同
following
的。
words.
那么法王当时怎么说的呢？就是
He
我
said
在
that
在此处的话，那就是开始就是大
before
家讲这
receiving the
部
empowerment, you
文
should
殊大圆满
reflect
的这
like
些法类
this.
的话，那
In
就是可
order
以
to
翻成
benefit
这
all
个各个
sentient
国
beings
家的。
throughout
就是当时的
the
寺有
reach
很
of
多
space, I
包
will
括这个
listen
文殊大
carefully
圆满
and
的话呢，
spread
应
this
该
practice
现
in
在
the
有尼
future.
泊尔文还有那个英
Here,
文
I give you
还有这
permission to
个什么
translate this
德文
teaching
就是
into
有
any
机会吧，
language
一
and
会儿我们
spread
就是
and
有机
propagate
会
it
的
to
时候，它
everywhere
可以
across
就
the
是翻
world
成那个
by any
日文
means.
就是还有这
Now
个韩
that
国的语
there
言
are
就是我
different
们这里也
languages,
是东
including
这方面的比较多，
English,
包括蒙
German,
古的语
and
言就是还有这
Nepali,
个其他的一些
and I
国家
think
的这个
whenever
语
we
言的
have
话呢，
an
因为这是
opportunity,
法王
it
就
can
是
be
也是一
translated
个
into
他的
Japanese,
一种
Korean,
发源，
and
他的一种开始
Mongolian,
用
and
不
so
同
on
的
and so
语言来
forth,
进行
because
传
many
播，
people over
尽
here
一切这
speak
个努力在这
other
个世界
languages.
各个国家
Ponso
呢就是可以
Rinpoche,
广
with
泛推广。
his aspiration
法
and
王的
his
这个文殊
permission
大圆满
to
呢，就像以
translate
前那
this
个
particular
伽玛朗
teaching
巴
into
的那
different
个
languages
文
and
解脱法
try
一
and
样的
encouraged
就
us
是
to
文解
try
脱这
to
个
propagate
西
this
藏僧
teaching
师
to
术
different
就是
countries
就是
in
西
this
藏多望
world.
境一样的，就是算是
This
比较这
particular
个
Dharma is
对
just
很多是
like
比较虽然就是
listening
它是最
through
胜的一个大圆满的
liberation
法，
through
但是
listening
呢，就是在末法
by
时代的
Karma
很多
Limpa
众生呢，就是比较这
or
个开许的比较广的。所以
the
法王当时五台山
Tibetan
去了
book
以后
of
的话呢，后来
dying,
也是
it is
当时
considered
开
as
许就
one
是
of the
让我们
most
这个翻
profound
成韩文
teachings
就是
within
这样的。
Maha'ati,
以前也
and
是
it will
讲
be
过这个
benefiting
文殊
lots of
大圆
sentient
满，当
beings
时那
in this
个
dark
就是
age.
他的这个
After
讲记上面也给
Ponso
大家讲
Rinpoche,
过。
in
那么
fact,
事
after
实上呢，
Ponso
这个
Rinpoche
弘扬法
reviewed
门，
this Dharma at
你
Mount
们
Wutai, he
所
also
有的人就是一
gave
共有
us
此
the
的责任
permission to
比如
translate
说
it
南州
into
堪布的话呢，
Chinese
不仅是
language.
向
That is
中国
why
这个
I
居住
had
在
also
印度的
spoken
藏族
and
人
talked
广
about
泛的这
the
个
teaching
传播
of
就是这个法
the Peaceful
确实
Manjushri
南州堪布
teachings.
就是会
Now
去
that you have received
他
it,
在91
each
年就是
one
会
of
去以
you
后的话
have
呢
the
就是
responsibility
也给
to
那边的
spread
很
this
多
Dharma
人都
teaching
传
as
播，包
well.
括当时南州佛学院的一些人。
Namdrol,
然后还有
in
呢，
fact,
就是在
spreading
台
the
湾
Dharma
呢，
is
在
the
香港
duty
啊，就是
bound
当这些地方呢
responsibility for
也
every
承
one
办
of
了
you.
弘法尼
Take
僧的广大
Khenpo
事
Namdrol
业
as an
就
example.
是
He not
南
only
州堪布
teaches the
对这个
Dharma
文殊法
extensively
门
to
特别有
Tibetan
信心，他的
monastics
那
in
个进
India,
修仪轨
but
他
also
天天
tries
都
to
在念，
promote
就
this
是
practice in
一直念，
places
就
like
对文殊
Taiwan,
大圆
Hong
满
Kong.
很有
In
信心。
fact, I
同样
know
的，你
Khenpo
们也
Namdrol
一定要具备
kept
这样的
on
能力，
practicing it
要
after
大规
receiving
模的
this.
把这个法呢，就
He
是
has
发
a
扬这
great
个光大。
devotion
就
and
是这个
faith to
法
this
王当时
particular
也是对
Dharma.
文殊法门的一种
He
开许，达成的主要学处
His
就是以
activity of
这个大
disseminating
信
the Dharma and
就帮助
benefiting
一切
sentient
众
beings
生
are deep and
不要
vast.
以为自己
Ponso
呢就
Rinpoche
是没
then
有这个
continued
义
to say
务，
that I
每
believe
个
you
人都
must
不应
also
该呢
have
就是忽
such
视这一神
ability,
圣
and
的
I
职
hope you
责。
can
就是
propagate
这个
this
呢，
practice
就是
on
法
a
王也
large
是对
scale
所
and
有
in
人的一个
profound
开
way.
许。所
The
以
main
这
training
也
of
是
Mahayana Buddhism is to
我觉得
cultivate the
将来
vast
还要这
altruistic
个法王对这个
intention to
佛教
help all sentient beings. So please do not think it is not your business to carry forward this teaching. Nobody should neglect the sacred mission. In terms of shouldering this mission, well, over here, Pongsu Rinpoche specifically pointed out and give us the permission to propagate this teaching. On top of that, he said that I also had set a good example for you. He he has been disseminated this teaching to a great number of lay practitioners and monastics in mainland of China. In fact, back then, I believe around that time, before 1993, I think we started having more Han Chinese coming into Larangar, beginning from maybe 1987 and more around 1991. So he pointed out that you should all remember to contribute your effort to spread this practice on various occasions. The empowerment was finished in the morning, and following that, Phuntsog Rinpoche gave 2 lectures on placing Buddhahood within reach. The practice manual of the Peaceful Manjushri, one was in the afternoon and the other the next day. The first lecture covered the part from the beginning stanza to Generation Bodhicitta. I did not record that teaching completely and just exerted a part to share with you. Phuntsog Rinpoche gave the teaching, used 2 days to give the teachings on placing the Buddha within reach. And then in total, when Phuntsog Rinpoche was giving teachings in the United States, he taught on it for 5 times. And the Westerners really was very much interested in it, because after Phuntsog Rinpoche reviewed this Dharma at Mount Wutai, he first went to India, and then in 1990 he gave this teaching and empowerments to many great masters, including Liu Kunzeng Rinpoche and Pinna Rinpoche, and many great masters had received it. Once that news spread to the West, everyone really wished to receive this teaching. So Phuntsog Rinpoche, in his schedules, a majority of the teaching requests were on his own termas, including the Purba teachings and Peaceful Manjushri teachings. So out of the 10 Dharma centers that Phuntsog Rinpoche went, he gave the teachings in 5 out of those 10. In the rest of the centers, he also read the oral transmissions as well. So this teaching was very popular at that time, very well known and renowned. And at the 5th stop, when Phuntsog Rinpoche was giving the teachings at the Paoyu Center in Washington, D.C., Phuntsog Rinpoche had given the complete Dharma teaching on the Peaceful Manjushri and placing Buddha within hand. So that part of the Vajrayana teaching had already been taught entirely at that stop, at that particular place. And that can be shared to you later after you receive the empowerment. Phuntsog Rinpoche, after bestowed the empowerment, he said that, as mentioned earlier, when listening to this teaching, you should think, I am here to listen to this exquisitely profound teaching and practice its meaning for the purpose of placing all sentient beings throughout the reach of space in Buddhahood. So first of all, you have to generate bodhicitta. Please cultivate this intention before receiving the teachings. The teachings you're going to receive is placing Buddha within reach, which provides step-by-step instruction for practicing the Peaceful Manjushri. If you want to actually follow this path, there are 2 kinds of instructions. The first part is the overall explanation of the stages of the path, and the second part is the specific pith instructions for actual practice. As for the first, I have elaborated on all the stages in the text entitled Heart Essence Bindu of the Heart, which is a text that complements the Peaceful Manjushri. You can say that it's a set of teaching. It complements each other in terms of the theory, because the Heart Essence Bindu of the heart specifically elaborates on the step-by-step practice and placing the Buddhahood within reach is rather a practice pith instruction. That is why these two truly complement each other. The second, the pith instructions of the actual practice are elucidated in the practice manual, placing Buddhahood within reach. Speaking of these two texts, the Heart Essence Bindu of the Heart follows the extensive Pandita's approach, while the placing Buddhahood within reach follows the profound Kusali's approach. In fact, the Heart Essence Bindu, since it follows the extensive Pandita's approach that is similar to the seven treasures of Longchen Rabjang, but the Heart Essence Bindu has only over 30 stanzas compared to that of the seven treasures. But out of the two approaches, in terms of the actual practice, you can follow the guidance of either of these two texts because both of them provide a complete and accurate path to perfect Buddhahood. This time I'm going to focus on placing Buddhahood within reach, and before that I would like to supplement it with some teachings from the Heart Essence Bindu of the Heart. In fact, Ponsuk Rinpoche kept on talking about the Heart Essence Bindu of the Heart. He kept on saying that this is a really wonderful teaching. For example, it talks about how one should be contented with whatever they have and not to have more greed. Also, on top of that, talks about how one should generate faith and engage in practice and so on. Also relying on a spiritual teacher and preserve pure precepts. For that reason, it really is a necessary Dharma teaching to study before the practice of actual Peaceful Manjushri. Because in the Peaceful Manjushri, he did not speak of those basics. Rather, the Heart Bindu speaks of that. That is why they are of good complementary to each other. Prerequisite for practice in pure Dharma is to have less desire and to be content. Specifically, to have less desire means to never think, if only I could acquire what he or she has when seeing someone who possesses abundant wealth, distinguished power and influence and good reputation. Contentment. So the previous part is to have less desire, and this part talks about contentment. Contentment means to always be satisfied with a sense of contentment, to think that this is good enough, regardless of whether you enjoy nice food and drink or not. A content person will never insatiably engage in meaningless mundane projects for a pursuit of better material enjoyment. Well, compared to the Western cultures, when we speak of contentment and have less desire, I wasn't sure if they would be able to accept it at the time, because the teachings within Buddhism is completely different than the Western culture. For example, they would seek for all kinds of things, but it seems that when Ponsuk Rinpoche was giving the teaching, they really felt that his teaching was very much meaningful. Ponsuk Rinpoche continued to say that if you're a person with less desire and contentment, you will not cling to the glory, reputation, achievement of this life. Otherwise, you will be blindly hold on to this world and lose the chance to practice the pure Dharma. No matter how much pleasurable enjoyment you experience, it only increases your desire and will never satisfy you. For instance, when somebody gets a pound of gold, he would want 2 pounds, and when one becomes the owner of one region, he would like to gain 2 regions. When a person is elected as the leader of a country, he wanted to sovereign 2 countries. The pit of desire can never be filled. Therefore, we must learn to decrease desire. No matter how much energy you spend on worldly pursuit, even if you devote your entire life, there will never be an end to it. fact, for the majority of people throughout their life, they chase after happiness, wealth, and fame. For that goal, they have to put in limitless effort every day, but the reward is usually insignificant, and suddenly they find that their life has reached its end. Considering this, it is more than wise to give up all kinds of worldly engagements and get involved only in accomplishing everlasting peace and happiness. Well, the way that Khenpo Rinpoche explained and taught in the West is completely different, because when he was giving teachings in Laronggar, he usually would teach on, for example, preserve the precepts, and would speak more of the quotations from sutras and tantras and so on. But over here, he simply adopted a more Western way, or a way that suited better for the Western audience. Now, think about happiness, wealth, or fame in this world. Aren't they just like what happened in a dream? Suppose we dream of doing business. Sometimes we're happy regarding a profit, and sometimes we are depressed about a loss. But this is just a dream. We have never even done any business in this dream. How then can there be benefit or loss? Similarly, happiness, possession, reputation in this world do not truly exist and are not different from appearances in a dream. So think about your own life all the way from birth till now. Some of you have a wonderful life so far, and some have suffered tremendously, while others have mixed feelings about their life. However, all of these are no different from a dream of last night. Besides memories, the pleasure and misfortunes that once happened will no longer be experienced. It doesn't really matter you experience happiness or suffering. It doesn't matter you are joyful because of the happiness you experience in the dream, or distress by misfortune in the dream. When you wake up in the next morning, nothing really happened. Similarly, the happiness and the suffering we experience today, however vivid they may be, will not exist by the next dawn. Our current emotions are as insubstantial as a dream. In the same way, the emotions of tomorrow and the day after tomorrow are no different from those in the dream of tomorrow and the dream after tomorrow. This is exactly what Longchenpa had stated in the resting illusion. All the dreams are just simply illusions. Everything that happens are just simply dreams, and we cannot attain anything substantial. In fact, all of those dreams are not everlasting or solid, since the experience of suffering and happiness have never truly existed and are based on delusion. There is no reason to be attached to them. However you are, once you decided to practice genuine Dharma, you need to train yourself to become content, desireless, and maintain the mindset. As long as I do not feel cold or hungry, all is good. Otherwise, if you spend lots of energy on worldly things, you would never be able to practice the sacred Dharma. In fact, back then, the Westerners did not spend much time on practice because they're very busy with the secular duties. However, they put down all the other duties and just came to listen to the Dharma teachings given by Khenpo Rinpoche, as the other day we had already learned from the host. On one hand, I think indeed the Westerners couldn't let go of their secular enjoyments, just like how people nowadays in the larger urban cities as well. So Khenpo Rinpoche over here stated that as long as you have some food to eat and some clothes to wear, that's good. Despite that, I think nowadays it is very difficult to even sustain that kind of level or that kind of quality of life in large cities nowadays. So all of you who stays in this valley, you should be content and desireless, because you still have that kind of level of that standard of livelihood. Nowadays, due to the decline of economic situation all over the world, people all all over the world are very much worried about livelihood. And compared to those people, I think as a practitioner, we can consider ourselves as being really happy because as a monastic, we won't die from hunger or starvation. So Khenpo Rinpoche over here states that as long as I don't feel cold or hungry, all is good. Otherwise, if you spend lots of energy on worldly things, you would never be able to practice the sacred Dharma. So we should be satisfied as long as we have enough food and clothes. Even if we had become the king of the world besides clothes, food, transportation, and living environment that are needed for daily use, we would never be able to enjoy everything we possess. Therefore, too much wealth, enjoyment, fame, and glory will not do you any good. In terms of spiritual practice, the best case is to focus only on the practice of Dharma and never get involved in worldly and trivial things. One who can accomplish that is considered as superior or supreme practitioner if you cannot totally give up worldly pursuit and you practice the Dharma, but also seek glory and wealth of this life. You can only be counted as a middling practitioner. If you eagerly chase after happiness and glory of this life, yet have some interest in the Dharma, you are inferior practitioner. In the worst case, if you only desire for the peace and wealth of this life, but have no wish to practice Dharma at all, you will never become a practitioner or a Buddhist. So Khenpo Rinpoche spoke of these 4 types of practitioners. I think all of you should make observation of your own mind stream. Maybe you can't be even considered as a practitioner before, but now you're becoming an inferior practitioner, and maybe then becoming a middling practitioner through various means, and slowly you can become a supreme practitioner that does not grasp onto anything for this lifetime. Khenpo Rinpoche says that, therefore, please examine your own mind according to what I said, and see if you were not a practitioner at all in the past. You need to start now to first become an inferior practitioner at least. If you were an inferior practitioner, you should do everything possible to reach the level of a middling one. If you were a middling practitioner, then stretch a little bit more to see if you can turn into a supreme practitioner who has no desire for this life at all. Khenpo Rinpoche's requirement is stated as above, and then the next part talks about relying on the teacher. On top of having less desire and more contentment, one should rely on a teacher. For anyone who genuinely wants to follow a spiritual path to enlightenment, initially you should develop less desire and be more content. With those qualities as the basis, you need to rely on a qualified teacher. Why is that? Because we need to follow the instructions of a teacher to get rid of all our faults and go against the Dharma and cultivate every potential quality that we do not have in our mind. What are the criteria for a qualified teacher whom we can rely on? According to Buddhist terminology, a teacher must possess certain uncommon characteristics that distinguish him or her from the ordinary people. We should follow a teacher who meets the required qualifications and has abundant merit and virtue. The first requirement and the most basic requirement is that he or she must possess loving kindness, the wish for all sentient beings to have happiness and compassion, the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Loving kindness and compassion are the most fundamental qualities a teacher should have, and on that basis, the teacher must also be able to explain the meaning of Dharma. Only when all these criteria are met can a person be called a qualified teacher. Now, Khenpo Rinpoche gives rather a different terminology to explain the characteristics of a lama or of a teacher, because he did not give the highest requirement that is taught within Vajrayana, the 9 types of criteria of a lama. For example, the teachings one should be well versed in all the teachings of Buddhism, and one should preserve pure precepts and completely proficient in giving teachings practice of the 5 treatises and so on and so forth. So Peaceful Rinpoche rather give the lowest requirement, present the lowest requirement, or most basic requirement rather. And then he continued to say then, now what are the ways that a disciple should rely on a teacher then? The supreme way is to practice the Dharma received from the teacher. The middling way is wholeheartedly attend to the teachers, so he or she is pleased. The inferior way is to make material offerings to the teacher to please him or her and to repay him or her kindness. These are the 3 ways of pleasing the teachers that a student must do when following teacher. As a disciple, you should request and receive teachings from teacher. There are different kinds of schools. For example, there are 8 different schools within the Tibetan tradition, Nyingma, Gyaltsen, Pagyo, Shakya, and Jonam, and the other branch schools as well, and receive Dharma teachings from the 2 supremes and 6 ornaments. The disciple should try their best to receive those teachings from their teacher. The best teachings are the sutras directly taught by the Buddha and the Shastras that interpret the intended meaning of the sutras composed by either great Indian masters such as the 2 supreme ones and the 6 ornaments, or by Tibetan accomplished masters and scholars such as those of the 8 lineages of attainment in the lands of snows. It is important that we receive these teachings directly from the teacher. Of course, the spiritual path is not just about receiving teachings from the teacher. It is not right if you just listen to a teacher before the Dharma throw and then put it aside. You should memorize all the words and their meanings by heart. If you are unable to grasp all the teachings, you should at least master the one that you are going to practice. Take the profound peaceful Manjushri, placing Buddhahood within reach. After listening to the explanation of the entire text from the teacher, you must remove any doubt or confusion about the words and their meaning. Otherwise, if you merely read it by yourself in an absent-minded manner and try to discern the meaning through your dualistic mind, you will never understand the deeper meaning. This is especially the case for Vajrayana practice. Even if you know the words inside and out, you will not comprehend the sacred meaning behind the words nor the instructions for practicing, because they're not explicitly written in the text and can only be reviewed by qualified teachers. Considering this, make sure you rely on a qualified teacher. In general, due to a different faculty and afflictive emotions of the recipient, different ways to teach the Dharma have to be adopted. If only one way of teaching is employed, it would be like prescribing the same medicine to all patients, in which case most patients would not be cured, and worse still, it is likely to cause more suffering to them. However, placing Buddhahood within reach is not the usual case. Whoever practices this menu wholeheartedly will benefit themselves immediately. In Tibetan medicine, Myrobalan is effective to dispel all 404 kinds of diseases. This is a special Tibetan medicine. When making a prescription, if the doctor uses Myrobalan as the main ingredients and supplements it with various other medicines according to health situation of the individual patient, the prescription may produce instant results. In the same way, placing Buddhahood within reach is as universally effective as Myrobalan. If a teacher imparts it to disciples, he or she should base the teachings on this practice manual and also add some pith instructions to supplement it. Otherwise, merely relying on one single teaching, it would be hard to place everyone in the state of Buddhahood. Now, magic power at noon of June the 19th, Kyabje Yijin Norbu, that is Pontsuk Rinpoche, sat on the lawn close to the shrine room enjoying the beautiful scenery. Amazingly, a group of visitors who came together, they were a group of visitors with the brown hair and the pale eyes, also another group with golden hair, blue eyes, and black hair and brown eyes. Pontsuk Rinpoche over here said that, well, the group of people who came to me, Pontsuk Rinpoche said to them, what an auspicious occasion you brown-haired people from North America, you golden-haired people from South America, and a black-haired old Asian man could gather together in this way. That refers to himself. Following that, he gave a spontaneous talk about the value of human life. Finally, all these 100 people took refuge in the three jewels. In the afternoon, the active volcano known as Kilauea in the southern part of this island of Hawaii began erupting. Some local people were in panic and came to His Holiness for blessings. He said to the people around him, more than 1,000 years ago, a conflagration in Mount Kipori at Samye in central Tibet was extinguished by Nanam Dorji Dudrum through his clairvoyance. Now, since I have the same name as being the reincarnation of him, may I be able to put this fire out. Ponzo Rinpoche took out his purba. His purba usually is tied around his waist. Sometimes his purba would be taken out or put away during passing the customs and so on. But that particular purba was said to belong to Lero Limpa. And then he chanted a sacred mantra while abiding in a meditative state. Soon afterwards, we were told that the volcano became quiet. On the second day, some geologists purposely called on Rinpoche and expressed their gratitude. They praised him from the depth of their hearts, saying that the might of Tibetan Buddhism and your blessings are truly unbelievable. The resident Lama at Nichon Dorji, Dryan Ling, told me that the story was featured in the local news. And then I was told later by Lama Lobsang, because Lama Lobsang was a very good host and he was very aware of the local situation. Now let us stop here today.